Hello YouTube, Dave here again. One of the things that's always been really kind of amazing to me, as well as deeply humbling and gratifying, is whenever someone comes to me and asks for me to help promote one of their products, be it the Hot Springs Islands books, which were already a funded Kickstarter project, or the water 3D printed terrain pieces that was sent to me by Mystic Realm. Which was to help promote their Kickstarter and get it funded, which again was a highly, highly rewarding thing to be a part of. And along those lines, I was contacted by the creator of a simplified RPG by the name of Cast World. The creator's name is Kanye, I hope I'm saying that right. And he wanted for me to help promote the product that he's created, which again is called Cast World. Cast is an acronym for Can't Anyone Save the and then World. So what this is, it's a simplified RPG. The idea behind it is that character creation and the rules are something that's meant to be kind of light and easy to pick up, easy to get into, and just something that puts more of an emphasis on the adventure or the stories than the actual rules or character creation or all the complicated math. The game uses the 3D6 system, so you use 3D6 for your attribute creation, character creation. You use it for your attacks. You use the D6s for damage in various numbers. So like some attacks will do 1d6, some will do 2, some may even do 3. And you also use the 3d6 for some ability challenges, where you make a roll against one of your ability scores to see if you can achieve a certain action. The game has several races included, which are human, woodfolk, which are kind of a plant-based creature, oxkin, which are oxen-like minotaur, and the hollow, which are kind of these unusual human-looking creatures, but some of them have some transparency to them. Very interesting kind of idea. With the races themselves, they don't give you abilities at the beginning of the game. It's something that you can get later on, as several of the races have some exclusive features that you can get, and we'll touch on that a bit later. So in order to create your character, you roll your 3d6, and you do this 8 times, instead of the traditional 6 for Dungeons & Dragons. These 8 rolls are to determine your stats, which are the first 6 you should be very familiar with, which would be Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma. But then there's 2 other stats added. There's Piety, which is essentially your devotion to a divine being and your connection with them. And then there's Birthright, which is abbreviated as BIR. And Birthright is exactly what it is. How privileged are you? These stats, these attributes, allow you to enter certain classes. So what I'm showing off here is the rules preview. I was sent the full SRD, but for the purposes of this video, I don't want to show any of the features or any of the class options or anything that's part of the actual paid product. And now the pay amount's not something that's very drastically high price, so it's very, very reasonably priced product. But again, I don't want to show anything that would be part of that paid PDF. So I'm just going to show off the stuff that's for free. But and a link to this PDF for the rules preview will be in the description below, as well as a link to where you can purchase this product on DriveThruRPG. So again, your stats determine which classes you can be a part of. There's quite a few different classes. There's, we have fighter, wizard, then there's kind of like your standard things like you have a cleric, you have soldiers, you have just a myriad of classes. In order to qualify for a class, you have to have, I think for most of them, you have to have a 13 in their prime attribute or greater. Now, if you don't actually get a 13 in any of your ability scores, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't play a character. One of the class options available is the class known as the Pauper. And the Pauper has less than 13 in everything. And they have a few different abilities that make them somewhat useful. And what's interesting is this game uses experience points to purchase and upgrade abilities. So with the Pauper class, you actually start with 5 of these experience points off the bat, which you can use to increase attributes to hopefully move into a different class. The trade-off being that the experience points cap out at 20, so you can only ever earn 20 experience points for any character. So the fact that they start off with 5 means that they can only earn an additional 15, meaning that they're likely to cap out or reach their maximum potential before other classes do. But at the same time, it's still something that you can use if you roll bad, because honestly, having low stats for a character isn't really the end of the world. So I like the fact that if you do roll poorly, instead of just saying, re-roll stats until you get a 13, here's an option for you if you roll particularly poorly, which I typically do. Each of the classes also get some sort of action that they can take, and we'll go over actions in a little bit. As far as other things to keep a note of, your character also has what are referred to as aspects, which are health points, or HP, armor points, which is labeled as AP, mana points, which is labeled as MP, and walking speed, which is labeled as WS. Also, after you roll your stats, choose your class, choose your race, you also get to choose a pair of elements. And the idea is you just consult sort of the chart here, and you can choose any 2, but you want to see how they kind of interact with one another. They can interact with each other in creative ways, which you can see here, or in destructive ways. So, for example, metal can be used to destroy wood, which makes sense. Wood is used to fuel fire, so it makes sense that it would be something that is considered creative, although I think if it were to go the other way around, it would sort of be, something that would be considered destructive. But the way that they feed into each other is labeled down here. So you track essentially what you have for your elemental affinities and what their relationship is to one another, because certain spells or features that you can choose later on or even at the beginning of the game require perhaps a creative affinity or a destructive affinity or relationships for your elements. And certain spells are powered by certain elements, meaning that I think you have to have the element in order to use the spell properly. Other than that, you could just have your standard things like, for example, an 8-hour rest fully recovers your hit points and mana points. If you're not able to take an 8-hour rest, then you would have to use like healing items or regenerative items. The currency is simple again. You have gold pieces, which is equivalent to 10 silver pieces, and 1 silver piece is equivalent to 10 copper pieces, which is, again, pretty standard if you're familiar with 5th edition. And as I touched on earlier, your progression is measured in experience points, but this game doesn't use traditional levels like Dungeons & Dragons does, for example. So when you earn experience points, you can use those points, once they're assigned to you, once they're awarded to you, to upgrade your character. So these can be used to increase your prime score attribute. It can be used to increase your hit points or mana points or walking speed. There are certain racial ones, for example, the wood folk, the tree-like race. They have a feature that they can purchase which allows them to heal faster if they apply plant matter to their bodies, because they are made out of plants. So that's exclusive to them. Only that race can have that feature. So the experience points are typically awarded at the end of each act of an adventure, and based off of the adventures that have been that I've seen so far, it appears as if it's standard. I will kind of show, even though this I think is part of the paid product, I will just show the fact that, for example, most of the adventures that I've seen, of the few that have been done so far, typically have 3 acts. At the end of each act, the Dungeon Master, or the Game Master actually, because Dungeon Master is a copyrighted product or property, the Game Master, and I know it says DM here, that's something that has been updated in the errata to GM for Game Master. But at the end of each act, the Game Master typically awards 1 experience point to each player, which they can spend immediately, or they can pool to purchase maybe some of the more expensive items. Each base statistic can be improved, but you can't improve it beyond 18. So 18 is the cap for each of the ability scores. and no character can accrue more than 20 experience points over the course of a campaign, so they are limited in that. Which brings me to the fact that this game is something that's designed to be more of a short-term game. It's not meant to be a years-long campaign. Typically speaking, a campaign with your characters would go for about 6 adventures, which would be typically anywhere from probably, I'd say, about 6 to 10 gaming sessions, depending on how complex the adventures actually are. Once you reach your 20 experience points, you can't go any higher than that. Doesn't mean that you can't continue to play those characters, but they've kind of reached out their maximum potential. What's kind of interesting is the game does allow you to essentially move your character and create a child of that character that you can play who inherits one of the player's traits if the game master allows it. Combat is quite simple. Again, it uses 3d6. You roll 3d6 at the beginning to determine initiative, and each round you can take certain actions. So you can move up to your maximum walking speed, take one standard action, and take as many free actions as the game master permits. So again, these can be done each and every round. The standard actions include dashing, which doubles the distance you can move each turn, using an item such as drinking a potion, throwing a rock, or you activating other magical items. You have attacks, which is making a melee or ranged attack against an enemy. Defend, which is taking a defensive stance, which adds 2 to your armor points until the end of your next turn. The Brave action, which allows you to attack twice this turn. However, you miss your next turn because you kind of went through this action surge, and the missing your next turn kind of acts as if you're winded. And then there's the default action, which some classes gain access to immediately, which is the same as defending as above. However, you get to save an extra attack for later. You may only have one extra attack saved at a time, and it is lost at the end of combat. Now, certain classes are only able to use some of these abilities. So, for example, the soldier classes and fighter classes and a lot of that stuff gets the default action, but only a few classes might get access to the Brave action. At least that's the way that I had read this so far. So to make your attack, you roll 3d6, and you're looking to get an amount that equals or exceeds the defender's armor points, including modifiers. Now, at this point in the game, modifiers have to be, as far as I can remember, purchased through upgrades. So there are upgrades that can give you bonuses to your attack rolls, or if you're the fighter class actually gets a bonus for fighting unarmed. Now, when I say fighter, initially I kind of defaulted to the Dungeons and Dragons fighter, but the fighter in this one seems to be more of like a bare knuckle fighter or a brawler type of character, like a pit fighter or something along those lines. And they actually get a +2 bonus to attack rolls when they're fighting unarmed. And but they would still use the regular unarmed damage as far as I can recall. I think the fighter's actually up here, so let's have a look. No, actually they get +2 to damage rolls as well when they don't have any weapons equipped. So again, kind of an interesting way of doing that. They can also use something that's called, I think, Tiger Claw Gauntlets, which are the only gauntlets in the game that currently have stats attached to them, and you can make an unarmed strike with them, and they deal an extra 1d6. So a fighter using those actually attacks for 2d6, which is pretty cool. Alright, so we went over the attacks. You also have your ability challenges. So the ability challenges are when you would do something against one of your attributes. So for example, if you're looking to maybe climb something or lift up a gate or portcullis, you might have to make a strength challenge where you would roll your 3d6 and you're looking to get below or equal to that stat. So again, for if you had, say, a 14 strength, if you get a 14 or below on your 3d6 rolls, then you would be considered to have succeeded in whatever the challenge is. When rolling these challenges and when rolling attacks or anything, I should mention that getting a natural 18 or a natural 3 are both considered a success. So there's not a critical failure in this game. If you roll all 6s or all 1s on your 3d6, then it's considered to be a success, which is kind of cool because the odds of doing both of those are equally bad. So it's kind of cool that they did that. Alright, so here we just have an example of some of the equipment that you can get. For example, you just got your common clothes, you have a day's supply of rations, and then you have a healing salve, which regains hit points, so it gets you plus 2d6 plus 2 hit points, uses a healing item, and you have 3 uses when you use the healing salve, which costs 2 gold. There are short swords, which has a reach of 5 feet, so a standard melee weapon. It does 1d6 for the damage. Dagger has a reach of 5 feet, but does 1d6 minus 2. I believe there's a minimum of 1 damage. And then you have, for example, your shield gives you plus 2 to your armor, and a leather breastplate gives you plus 1 to armor, but it also gives you plus 1 hit point, so it can actually absorb some of the damage that is dealt to you, which is, again, kind of a cool way of dealing with armor in this game, because in Dungeons & Dragons, for example, it just increases your armor class. It doesn't actually absorb any of the damage, but in this case, armor can actually increase your hit points, making you tougher to take down because you have it. Alright, so spells, we have here just a few examples of them again. So with our spells we have Firebolt, which costs 2 magic points, which you regain again whenever you take a short rest, or not a short rest, but whenever you take a rest, which is an 8-hour rest. So the information for it here is it's a single target, has a range of 60 feet, and you have to have a fire affinity in order to use it. So again, the spells can be restricted by the elemental affinities and relations that you had chosen earlier in your character creation. So, for example, if you want to play a fire-based mage, you want to make sure that you have fire for your affinity. It does 1d6 plus 3 damage. You have Force Missile, which 2 magic points, and it deals 1d6 minus 1 damage. You may cast it up to 3 times at once. If you do, you may select a new target for each spell. And then we have Natural Cure, which is you have to have the wood affinity, and I believe in the actual updated SR, or the reference document that's provided, I believe Natural Cure is something that only the wood folk can have. So, but you regain 1d6 plus 4 hit points, and you can't use this spell on consecutive turns. And then finally we've got some ability increases that you can get by spending your experience points. So, for example, if you want higher stamina, you spend 1 experience point, your maximum hit points increases by 4, and you can take this ability as many times as you like. Some of these things are limited to only being able to take once, so unless it states that you can take as many times as you want, then you can only take it once, for example. Another one that we have here is, so higher mana is the same thing, increases by 4. Higher base stat, you spend 1 experience point to increase it by 1 to a maximum of 18. And then you have the Brave action. So for 3 points, you can get the Brave action, which, as we saw up here before, allows you to attack twice in a turn, although you skip your next turn. So you can make this big surge of action. You know, if you think an enemy might be near death, you can do that. Or if you think you're near death, again, you can use that to try to get the most out of it. So again, not every class has access to that ability, but you can spend 3 experience points to get it. You can also spend 3 experience points to earn default action, which again, not every class has. So I think I may have said they did earlier. I apologize for that. Only certain classes get the default action. Which something that if I were to give a note, the default action might want to change its name to something else, because default kind of implies that everyone should have it. But regardless, you can spend 3 experience points for that. And then you just have an example of the creature stat block. So you've got kobolds, which have a 7 strength, 15 dex, 9 constitution, 8 intelligence, 7 wisdom, 8 charisma, 11 piety, and a birthright of 5. They have 5 hit points, 8 armor points, 0 magic points, and a walking speed of 30. The kobolds gain -2 to attack and ability challenges that rely on sight while in sunlight, so they have sort of like a daylight sensitivity. They get +2 to attack when at least 1 ally is within 5 feet of their target. They carry a dagger and a sling and they can attack with either, and it gives sort of the abilities there. So that is the basics of this game, and I got to be honest, I think this is actually a pretty cool role-playing game. It's not something that's meant to be, like I said, a long-term thing. It's kind of something that you get a few friends together, and over the course of, you know, a couple months, you just play some fun adventures. You know, the character creation is quite simple, and I'm going to show character creation here actually, so I'm going to go through and do the character creation in front of the camera. Which is really cool. So again, I like this quite a bit. I think that this has a lot of potential to it, and it's something that I want to see succeed. It is very much a passion project by the creator, and he is essentially the sole creator. Like, he's doing all the work for this, and I want to see this succeed. You know, it's not necessarily going to become, you know, the world's greatest role-playing game, but it's not necessarily what that's meant to be. It's just meant to be something that's fun, and just, you know, get some friends together and play some characters. You know, roll up the characters really quickly and go on some adventures. You know, level your characters quickly, again, through non-traditional means. And it's just something that I think is really cool, and I want to see this succeed. So, like I said, there's going to be a link in the description below that you can go check it out on DriveThruRPG if you want to purchase the full product. And I will have a download link that you can use to download just this free rules preview. So, with that said, I want to move on now, and I'm actually going to go ahead and create my character. Alright, so here we have the character sheet, and again, it's a pretty simple sheet. There is a second sheet for spell information, but I'm not going to be making a wizard. I'm planning on making a fighter if I can, based off my rolls. But you can see here, you just have name, age, gender, experience points, remaining experience points. So you track how many you have total and how many you have available, along with your information there. You have race, class, your elemental affinity, and its relation. So what your, you know, if it's creative or destructive. So you have that. You have a space. I actually have a workspace up top here for your ability, your statistic rolls. So you've got your 8 rolls here, and again, you can assign those how you wish. And then you just have your abilities and items. So like I said, it seems pretty simple. I've got just my 3d6 here from my Tomb of Annihilation dice set. So let's go ahead and just roll some character, and roll a character. Alright, that's not good. First thing we got is a 7. That's a little bit better. So we did get a 13, which means I will be able to qualify for a class. I'm going to choose the fighter class. Let's have a look here. So that's the second one. Third is going to be a 10. Then we have 8, we have an 11, another 11, another 13, a 10, and an 8. Alright, so the concept that I'm going to go with, so the name I'm just going to make Ethan my kind of go-to character name. His age, so he's going to be starting off here, so I'm going to have him as a 19-year-old male. Doesn't have any XP yet, so we're just going to put zeros there, XP total 0. Our race is going to be human. Class is going to be fighter. And for elemental affinities, I don't think it's going to affect the fighter as much, but I'm going to give him affinities for water, and why not water and fire? Alright, so just looking here, just up at the graph, so water to fire is a destructive affinity, or relation. So, I have destructive. Alright, so now I need to assign my ability scores. So, again, so your hit points, you know, armor points, all these things are, you know, determined not by your stats so much. Your stats are just for, like, checks and things along those lines, so I don't need to necessarily worry about having like the high constitution for hit points, stuff like that. There are classes that do require, like, so each of these stats would have a class that corresponds with it. So I know for sure I'm going to be putting 13 into strength. I think I also want to put 13 into probably dexterity, for any sort of checks that I need to make with dexterity to perhaps avoid things like traps or maybe some powerful spells if they have that. Constitution, I am going to give an 11 to, so I've got 13 used, and 11 used. Intelligence, he's fairly intelligent, so I want to give him a decent score there, so that's another 11. Wisdom, we're going to go with 10 for that, as well as a 10 charisma. So finally, his birthright and his piety. So he's not a noble birth or a privileged birth. So that's automatically going to be the lowest ability score that I give him. And then for his piety, he's not the most devout, but at the same time, he's not an atheist. So we'll give him the 8. All right. So again, we're starting off with just our base character. So right now our aspects are similar to that. So we have 10 hit points to begin with, 10 armor, which may change. So I'm just gonna leave that alone for now. We have 10 mana points, which I'll probably not likely end up using, and a walking speed currently of 30. That may change again with our equipment as well. Something that is worth noting is that you can multi-class. By spending 2 experience points, you can enter another class, so you would gain whatever their starting features are. So it is worth noting as well. So for example, with the 13 in dexterity, you do have to meet their requirements for their attribute. So I could become like a roguish type character if I wanted to multi-class into that. So something else to keep in mind when you're building your character. So the fighter starts off with, so he gets the brave action, and barehanded, which is +2 to attack and damage, unarmed. Alright, and also for items, we'll go with common clothes. Oh. So common clothes, leather breastplate, a dagger, which we're probably not going to use, but we have it, and a healing salve with 5 uses instead of the standard 3. We also have 3d6 for our starting gold, so let's roll that to start. So we also start off with 14 gold. Alright, so now we do need to fix a couple things here, so I'm just going to go over on this rules reference here. So we have leather breastplate gives an armor point of +1, so that would give me an 11 armor class, and it also gives me an extra hit point. So my hit points go from 10 to 11, and it doesn't affect my walking speed. There are heavier armors that do reduce your walking speed, so we don't have to worry about any of that. Now as far as our barehanded fighting goes, so again I think it gives us 1d6 plus 2. So there we go for that. And that's actually pretty much it. I mean, I could spend some gold to give me some items if I wanted to. So why don't I actually do that? So I'm going to also purchase a shield, which costs 2 gold, which brings me down to 12. Whoops. So I'm down to 12 gold, and I have a shield, which also gives +2 to armor points, so my armor rating goes up to 13. Alright, so that's if I use it. So I have 13 armor with my shield. I can attack unarmed for 1d6 plus 2 with a +2 bonus on the attack roll. I currently have 11 hit points, and that's my starting character. So, zoom back out here. So that's it. That's the character creation. It's really, honestly, that simple. So as time goes on, again, you can spend points to level your character up. So let's just say, you know, for the purposes of this video, that I gained an experience point. So I'm going to have XP total up here. It's going to be put down as 1. I'm going to spend that right away, so I'm going to still have XP remaining of 0. But I'm going to use that to give myself higher stamina. So I'm just going to... I guess I don't actually have to write that in. Oh, no, I'll still write it in just so that I know that I took it. Stamina, so that would increase my hit points from 11 up to 15. So there you go. Like I said, that's really as simple as it is. Again, I think this is a really cool idea. It's definitely a major passion project by the creator, so I want to see it do well, especially by his standards. So I'm hoping that this will promote it a little bit. So again, this is Cast World. You can find it on Drive-Thru RPG, and you can also get the free rules preview PDF by clicking on the link below, as well as the link below. There's another one that I'll put down so you can actually go to where it's up for sale on Drive-Thru RPG. So thank you guys very much for watching this video. If you check this out, let me know what you guys think of it in the comments below. Like I said, there's not much that I would necessarily have as criticism for this game. The major thing that I think I would like to see would probably be a way of getting bonuses to the attack rolls based off of things like, in the default rules, it does say, if I can find the attributes here, so it does say like your character's physical prowess and ability in hand-to-hand combat, but that's not necessarily reflected in the attack rules or the damage rules or anything along those lines. So it'd be nice to see something along those lines perhaps change. Now again, you know, you do have to have a 13 strength in order to be the fighter class, which does give a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls. So with unarmed strike, so again, maybe that's where that kind of comes into play. But it would also be nice to have other classes get bonuses to the attack rolls. Just going to have a quick look through and just see what we have for our upgrades here, because there may be upgrades that give you a bonus to attack as well. Okay, I actually don't see that in here. So I think, again, as a note, if you don't want to include stat-based increases to attack rolls or things along those lines, it might be worth throwing in an ability that you can gain with your XP to do that. So Kanye, if you're listening, that would be probably the one thing I would say might be worth putting in there, is doing a way to increase, like, to get an attack bonus on your attacks, even if it's restricted to a particular class. You know, like say it has to be the fighter or the soldier, or I believe there's a paladin class in here as well. So you got cleric, or knight, sorry. So, you know, maybe like those classes could spend an experience point to gain a +1 bonus to their attack rolls, or something along those lines. It's just something that's worth pointing out. Other than that, though, I think that this is an absolutely fantastic, you know, RPG. It's something, again, I want to see it succeed. I want to see it do well, and you know, I'd like to know that hopefully this video will get at least a couple people to check it out. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.